I am staring out the plane window at the Seattle skyline fading away. Right now, the most expensive wedding of the year is falling apart. And I am the one who burned it to the ground. My family will tell everyone I am a monster. They will say I ruined Chloe's big day out of spite. But this was not an act of revenge. It was a rescue mission for myself. Because when your own blood treats you like a free tool, sometimes walking away means taking the whole system down with you. A year ago, I actually believed things were changing. My father, Mr. Harrison, called me early in the morning with a rare warmth in his voice. It was my birthday. He told me to dress elegantly and meet them at the private Coastal Seafood Club in Seattle at exactly 8 o'clock. He said they had a wonderful surprise planned just for me. I arrived right on time. The club was breathtaking, perched right on the edge of the water with massive glass windows overlooking the dark, rolling waves of Puget Sound. The hostess smiled and led me to a gorgeous table set for 4, right by the glass. I sat down, smoothed out my dress, and waited. An hour passed. Then 2. The restaurant filled with laughter, the clinking of expensive crystal, and the rich smell of roasted seafood. But my table remained empty. I checked my phone countless times. Not a single text. The waitstaff began to circle my table, giving me those quiet, pitying glances that burn right through your pride. It is a profoundly humiliating feeling, sitting completely alone in a crowded, beautiful room, slowly realizing that you have been forgotten. I finally stepped out onto the breezy deck to call my father. It went straight to voicemail 3 times. When he finally picked up, there was loud music and chatter in the background. He sounded rushed and entirely dismissive. He told me Chloe was having a severe panic attack. He said she was in crisis, and they had to rush her somewhere private to calm her down. He told me I was strong, that I would understand, and then he hung up. I just stood there in the cold wind. I have always been the reliable one, the sister who demands nothing and fixes everything. So I went back inside, paid for the glass of water I drank, and went home. The silence in my apartment was deafening. I sat on my couch in the dark eating cold takeout, trying to convince myself that my sister's well-being was more important than a birthday dinner. 3 days later, the truth hit me. I was scrolling through social media when I saw a post from Julian, Chloe's wealthy fiancé. It was an album from a massive, lavish party. In the center of the first photo was Chloe, glowing, holding up her hand to show off a giant diamond ring. My parents were standing right beside her, toasting with champagne. I zoomed in on the background. Behind them were the exact same floor-to-ceiling windows, the exact same dark waves of Puget Sound. They were at the Coastal Seafood Club. On the exact same night I sat waiting for them. A sickening, hollow feeling washed over my chest. My hand shook as I opened my banking app on my phone. I went straight to the joint family savings account, a fund I had been pouring my IT salary into for years because my father insisted a family should always have a shared safety net. The balance was 0. They didn't just abandon me on my birthday to throw a secret engagement party for the golden child. They drained my life savings to pay for the champagne they were drinking. I sat there staring at the screen, and something deep inside me permanently broke. In psychology, there is a term for people who grow up in my position: the glass child. We are not invisible because we do not exist. We are invisible because we are strong. Because we are self-sufficient, our parents look right through us, assuming we never need care, never need love, never need protecting. Over the years, my sacrifices were no longer seen as gifts. They became a baseline expectation, a functional utility my family felt entirely entitled to. Glass children slowly lose their voices, swallowing their own needs so the golden child can endlessly shine. But the world misunderstands what happens when a glass child finally shatters. It is never a sudden act of cruelty. It is the desperate, silent scream of someone who was entirely stripped of the right to be vulnerable in their own home. I did not call them to scream. I did not cry. I just closed my laptop and sat in the dark. The Eleanor who would have begged for an explanation died in that room. And the Eleanor who woke up the next morning was ready to go to work. A few days after the engagement photos surfaced, my phone rang. It was my father. I answered, holding my breath, half expecting a delayed apology or at least a stammered excuse about my forgotten birthday. Instead, he asked me to come over to the house immediately. He said it was urgent family business. I walked into my parents' living room later that afternoon. It was covered in glossy bridal magazines, imported fabric swatches, and empty champagne flutes. Chloe was sitting on the sofa, looking dramatically stressed. My father paced the room, rubbing his temples in frustration. He did not mention the Coastal Seafood Club. He did not mention my drained savings account. It was as if my birthday had simply been erased from history. He looked right at me and let out a long sigh. He said that luxury wedding planners were outrageously expensive and Chloe's budget was already spiraling out of control. Then he gave me that familiar, heavy look. The exact look that meant I was about to be given a massive job. He leaned in and said that family always helps family. He told me that with my background in IT and project management, I was the only one smart enough to handle the complex logistics of a high-society wedding. He wanted me to build a master vendor portfolio, a completely centralized automated system to track every massive contract, every invoice, and every payment for the entire event. He wanted me to do it entirely for free, because it was my duty as the older sister. I stood there, looking at the man who had just stolen my financial future to pay for a party, now asking me to work for free to make that party perfect. A year ago, I would have argued. I would have cried and asked why my time, my money, and my feelings meant absolutely nothing to them. But the new Eleanor just nodded. I smiled, looked my father dead in the eye, and told him I would be honored to take over. For the next 8 months, I became the invisible architect of Chloe's extravagant dream. While my mother and sister spent their weekends tasting artisan cakes and flying out of state for custom dress fittings, I spent my nights staring at endless spreadsheets in my dark apartment. I coded a secure custom portal from scratch. I integrated complex banking APIs to handle the massive staggered deposits required by the waterfront venue, the luxury caterers, and the imported floral designers. Every single vendor communicated solely with me. I was the one who negotiated the elaborate lighting rigs. I was the one who scheduled the delivery of the custom ice sculptures. I set up the automated payment schedules, linking them directly to Julian's wealthy family accounts and my father's remaining credit lines. They praised me at our polite, superficial family dinners. My father boasted to his golf friends about how much money his brilliant eldest daughter was saving him. He truly thought he had successfully exploited me again. But they did not understand what they had actually done. By forcing me to build and manage this massive digital infrastructure, they handed me the keys to the entire kingdom. Every login, every master password, every security protocol was exclusively mine. I did not just manage the wedding. I became the very foundation of the wedding. Without my system, there was no record of the catering menu. There was no timeline for the bridal party. There was no proof of payment for the live entertainment. I was the single point of failure for an event that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. They were so blinded by their own entitlement that they never stopped to wonder if the workhorse might finally snap. They just kept loading more and more weight onto my shoulders. I took every single task they threw at me with a calm, polite smile. I meticulously organized every vendor file. I ensured the payment triggers were set flawlessly. I wove a digital web so tight and so complex that no one else could possibly decipher it. I was the perfect, obedient, invisible daughter. Right up until the sun rose on the morning of the wedding. 5 o'clock in the morning. The sky over Seattle was still a heavy, suffocating black. In just a few hours, the massive coastal estate was supposed to transform into a high-society paradise. There would be hundreds of elite guests, imported white roses, and endless champagne. But right now, the silence in my small hotel room was absolute. I sat alone at the edge of the bed, staring at the closed lid of my laptop. For 8 grueling months, I had been the perfect, obedient machine. I had smiled through every arrogant demand from my father. I had nodded quietly while my sister threw tantrums over the exact shade of her napkins. I had swallowed the bitter reality that they had stolen my financial future to fund this exact day. Today was supposed to be Chloe's grand, flawless fairy tale. But a fairy tale built entirely on stolen money and exploited labor is nothing but a fragile house of cards. And I was finally ready to pull the bottom card. I opened the laptop. The bright screen cut through the dark room. I logged into the master vendor portfolio, the complex digital kingdom I had built with my own unpaid, exhausted hands. The dashboard glowed with green indicators, showing hundreds of thousands of dollars in pending transactions, all perfectly cued for the final wedding day release. I took one slow, deep breath, feeling a strange, absolute calm wash over me. Then I began to dismantle it. I navigated to the waterfront venue's secure banking portal. I hovered my cursor over the massive final payment required to unlock the doors. Cancel. I opened the luxury catering contract, an absurdly expensive order of fresh oysters and vintage wine. Void. I moved methodically down the list. The string quartet, the custom ice sculptors, the imported floral designers. One by one I clicked revoke. I deleted the routing numbers. I severed the automated API connections. I wiped the entire payment database completely clean. In less than 30 minutes, the entire financial foundation of the wedding was irrevocably gone. I knew exactly what would happen. The vendors would arrive, swipe their systems, and see decline transactions. The venue manager would lock the grand ballroom doors. The caterers would pack up their trucks and drive away. The entire event would collapse before the sun even fully rose. But simply crashing the system was not enough. If I just left it at that, they would spin a lie. My father would play the victim, claiming it was a massive bank error. Chloe would cry, and they would ultimately blame me for being an incompetent sister who ruined the big day. They would twist the narrative just like they always did. I needed to make sure the truth was entirely out of their control. I opened my email client and selected the master guest list. 350 individual addresses. Julian's wealthy, judgmental relatives. My father's boastful golf partners. The high society friends Chloe had spent years trying to impress. I drafted a very simple, extremely polite message. I wrote that, unfortunately, the wedding ceremony and reception had been immediately suspended due to severe fraudulent debts. I attached the zero-balance vendor invoices. I attached the formal notice of the canceled venue. And then I attached one final, undeniable document. A screenshot of the bank statement showing my father draining my life savings to pay for the engagement party. Absolute proof that the Harrison family had been entirely broke and living on stolen money for months. I set the automated delivery timer for 10 o'clock in the morning, the exact moment Chloe was scheduled to walk down the aisle. By the time their phones started buzzing in their pockets, the venue would be empty, the flowers would be gone, and there would be absolutely nowhere for them to hide from the humiliation. I watched the scheduling bar turn green. The system was locked. The truth was loaded. I slowly closed the laptop, the soft click echoing like a gavel in the quiet room. I stood up, zipped my small suitcase, and walked out into the hallway. No one saw me leave the hotel. I stepped into a waiting taxi in the cool morning air, heading straight for the airport, leaving my family to wake up to the dawn of their own making. I am looking down at the clouds right now. The plane is climbing higher, and with every passing mile, the crushing weight on my chest gets a little bit lighter. I know exactly what is happening down there in Seattle at this very moment. The screaming, the absolute panic, the desperate, frantic phone calls to banks that will not answer, and vendors who have already driven away. They are probably cursing my name to anyone who will listen. They are painting me as a jealous, bitter monster who destroyed a fairy tale out of spite. But sitting here looking out at the endless blue horizon, I feel absolutely nothing but peace. For my entire life, I was conditioned to believe that love meant shrinking myself to make room for their egos. I was taught that being a good daughter, a good sister, meant being a limitless free resource. I gave them my time, my money, my expertise, and my quiet compliance. But I am finally empty. And the beautiful thing about being completely empty is that they have absolutely nothing left to take from me. Society loves to romanticize unconditional forgiveness. We are constantly bombarded with the idea that blood is thicker than water. We are told that family is everything, and that true virtue lies in endless patience and turning the other cheek. But there is a very harsh, unspoken truth that people refuse to admit. Kindness without boundaries is not a virtue. It is an open invitation for exploitation. It is a slow, quiet form of self-destruction. When you give everything you have for free, people do not respect your generosity. They do not look at your exhaustion and feel gratitude. Instead, they simply adapt to your sacrifices and begin to demand them as a basic, expected standard. And the moment you finally find the courage to draw a line in the sand, something incredibly predictable happens. The very people who have spent years feeding off your endless compromises will suddenly play the victim. They will point their fingers, cry fake tears, and label you as toxic and selfish. They will call my actions today an unforgivable betrayal. But self-defense is not a betrayal. Tearing down that massive digital empire I built with my own unpaid hands was not a petty act of revenge. It was not about ruining a party. It was the ultimate, necessary act of reclaiming my own autonomy. Sometimes the quiet, absolute violence of simply turning your back and walking away is the only cure for a lifetime of subtle systemic abuse. You cannot heal in the exact same environment that broke you. I know there are so many of you out there listening to this who understand exactly what I mean. You are the reliable ones, the fixers, the designated adults in families full of overgrown children, the ones who quietly swallow your own tears in the dark, because someone else in the house is always crying louder. You have spent your entire life believing that if you just work a little harder, if you just sacrifice a little more, they will finally see you. You think that one day they will wake up, look at you, and finally appreciate your worth. They will not. Respect is never a reward handed out for blind obedience. If your presence is constantly treated like a cheap utility, your absence is the only lesson they will ever truly understand. You do not owe your life savings to people who cannot even bother to remember your birthday. You do not owe your mental health, your late nights, or your professional skills to people who only call you when they need a free tool to fix their own mistakes. It is terrifying to pack a bag and walk out the door in the quiet hours of the morning. It is agonizing to know they will permanently paint you as the villain in a story you actually spent years trying to save. Let them have their twisted narrative. Because while they are standing in the wreckage of a lie they built themselves, you will be breathing real air for the first time in your life. Do not be afraid to burn the bridge that is slowly draining your soul. Press the delete button. Cancel the contract. Buy the ticket. Walk away. Because the only person in this world you are truly obligated to save is yourself.